Director Don Deere.
Here.
Director Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Harold Williams.
Here.
Director Desi Alvarez.
Here.
President Scott Houston.
Here. Right?
Correct, we have a quorum.
All five are here. Okay. So we have a quorum, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And you know what, I never identified anybody to lead us, but Barkev, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today? Everybody, please stand up if you're able.
Right hand. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Barkev. Okay, with that, EJ, do we have any public comment today?
Mr. President, we did receive a request for public comment. Mr. Stephen Brown mentioned that he would be joining us and would like to make a public comment. So, Mr. Brown, if you're with us, you do have 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate your time. I'm going to speak to, I think it's item 8B on your agenda this afternoon. So as it was said, my name is Stephen Brown. I appreciate the chance to talk to the board today. I am seeking a nomination to become to fill the vacancy for alternate special independent districts on the Los Angeles Local Agency Formation Commission. One of my goals was to talk to some of the key water districts in the Los Angeles County area, and of course West Basin is, as I call it, first among equals. You guys are, I think, celebrating 7 decades of being in this business and providing wholesale water to I think over 1 million people. I come from a much smaller district in the northern part of the county. It's in the Kinaloa Mesa district, out just up in Pasadena area. What I wanted to do was, I know you have received some materials. There's a statement of candidacy. There's also a letter that I sent to Mr. Caldwell that I hopeful that you guys can all take a look at as well. I won't reiterate a lot of the stuff that's in there because it's right in front of you, but I do hope that you take the time to take a look at all of that material. The reason I wanted to talk to you today was basically to underscore the seriousness with which I view the position of alternate on LAFCO. I think I have a significant amount of relevant experience. My family and I moved here about 4 or 5 years ago from the Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia. In that space of time, I was involved in a lot of congressional redistricting efforts on behalf of the National Democratic Party. I ran the effort in the 2000 cycle. I'm a lawyer, lobbyist, so please don't hold that against me. But I've amassed several decades of experience working in different policy areas, one of which was water, as a matter of fact. And when I moved out here to Pasadena, I wanted to not only just immerse myself in my neighborhood, but also get to learn what I still think is probably the key issue facing Los Angeles County, and that is water. How that fits into LAFCO is that I think it's vitally important that folks on LAFCO, whether they be voting commissioners or alternates, bring a perspective of water and the challenges that every water district faces, no matter the size. And I was struck by the fact that when I looked over your agenda today, which is quite busy, no matter what the size of the district is, we all have the same challenges, just in a different type of scale. What I can say to you is that if you support me in this endeavor, I will bring a tremendous sense of responsibility to my work at LAFCO on your behalf and other water districts' behalf. As I said, I think that's a unique perspective that can't get too much attention. I can tell you that I am extremely hardworking and diligent. When I get focused on a project or when I say I'm going to do something, I actually do it. I follow through. I take that responsibility very, very seriously. And then finally,
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
I apologize. That did conclude your 3 minutes. I don't know if you can
Okay.
summarize or quickly wrap up.
No, I appreciate it. I don't want to take any.
last thoughts.
I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you. I will work very hard to be your representative, and I will do a good job. I promise. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Brown. And we did receive the materials. And also thank you for your service on the irrigation district. So thank you again for speaking to us. Let's see. Thank you, sir. EJ, well, anybody else?
Mr. President, that concludes the request for public comment, though this meeting is being held both virtually and in person. If we have any attendees or any other attendees that are attending virtually that would like to make public comment, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. Mr. President, I do not see any other requests.
All right, very good. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we're going to, just so everybody knows, I'm going to take one item out of order after presentations. That'll be item 9A from our information calendar to our legislative update. But first we'll do presentations. So we have 2 presentations today. We have proclamations for both, and I think what we'll do is we'll go through the proclamations, and then if we want, staff wants to do some photos, we can do that after both in a row. So with that, the first one is recognizing National Hispanic Heritage Month. And I don't know if any of my colleagues wanted to read this, otherwise I will happily read it. Anybody? Okay, I'll go ahead and read through this because I do think, the words are important. And also, National Hispanic Heritage Month is, it's in a sequence, right? So we're bit in the middle of it. So, whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month is observed from September 15th to October 15th by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. And whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month coincides with the Independence Day celebrations of several Latin nations, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua from Spain on September 15, 1821, Mexico from Spain on September 16, 1810, Chile from Spain on September 18, 1810, and Belize from Great Britain on September 21, 1981. And whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month was first introduced in 1968 as a means to recognize the significant contributions of the Hispanic and Latinx community and the growing acknowledgement of the multicultural identity shaping the United States. And whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month acknowledges the 62.1 million people of Hispanic and Latinx descent in the United States, who make up 19% of the total population, including the 4.8 million community members accounting for nearly half of Los Angeles County's population, the largest population of Hispanic and Latinx in the nation. And whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month recognizes this year's theme of Todos Somos Uno, we are all, we are one, which recognizes not only the diversity within the community, but the power that comes from being a united community, one people, one vision. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this, the 25th day of September, 2023, that we, the directors of West Basin Municipal Water District, hereby recognize National Hispanic Heritage Month as an annual celebration of the many contributions, achievements, and extensive histories of Hispanic, Latino, Latinx Americans and their influence on the United States. And again, that's celebrated from September 15th to October 15th. So happily, we are in the midst of that. I want to recognize that. So is there anything my colleagues want to say at this time regarding Hispanic Heritage Month? Yes or no? All right, very good. And secondly, we have an upcoming week that we want to acknowledge as well, and that's Water Professionals Appreciation Week. So obviously, we're in the business of water, so here we are. This occurs from October 7th until October 15th. Whereas water is the lifeblood of California, and without safe and reliable water, no community and no sector of the economy, from high tech to manufacturing to agriculture, can thrive or expand. And whereas now more than ever, the water industry is proud of the important role our essential workers play in making sure our communities have safe and reliable water supplies. And whereas water professionals at local public water and wastewater agencies work diligently to plan for the future, maintain and upgrade infrastructure, and improve the safety and resiliency of local water supplies for their communities. And whereas water professionals at local public water and wastewater agencies work diligently to plan for the future, maintain and upgrade infrastructure, and improve the safety and resiliency of local water supplies. And whereas thousands of essential water, wastewater, and recycled water industry professionals in the state dedicate their careers to keeping drinking water, recycled water, and treated wastewater safe and reliable for use by all Californians. And whereas West Basin Municipal Water District employs 50 full-time employees who work together on a daily basis to ensure the reliable delivery of drinking and recycled water supplies to a service area of nearly 1 million residents. And whereas West Basin employees collaborate with other water industry professionals at the local, state, and federal levels to achieve the common goal of providing reliable water and wastewater services to support healthy communities, strong economies, and sustainable environments. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this, the 25th day of September, 2023, by the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors, that this district hereby recognizes and supports California's 2023 Water Professionals Appreciation Week and extends its sincere gratitude and appreciation to the state's countless committed water industry professionals, including West Basin's own employees, who work each and every day to provide essential water supplies and services to our communities. And that is, both of these, by the way, are signed by all 5 members of the Board of Directors of West Basin Municipal Water District. So with that, I'll ask if my colleagues want to say anything about either of these recognitions, but Water Professionals Appreciation Week, anything anyone would like to say? Very good. Well, I will go ahead and just say a few words. So obviously, especially Water Professionals Appreciation Week, that is our business, that's our role, that's what we do. And as this said, we have our whole staff dedicated to the work. So we want to say thank you, not just to those of West Basin, but all the water districts and wastewater districts and irrigation districts and, all the above across the state of California this week. We all know it's extremely important work. Without it, none of us would be here. And our residents and our businesses count on us every day. When they turn on that tap, when they flush the toilet, when they take a shower, when they're doing what they need to do to make life happen. So I want to say thank you to everybody for that. And of course, I also, want to thank everybody when we think about, Hispanic heritage in the United States. And so many people who come from around the world, and especially in Los Angeles County, that are a part of a very vibrant and diverse community. And I think personally an example to the world of how we can all work together and pretty well live in harmony. If you look at LA County as a microcosm of the United States and what we do, but also just recognizing the many peoples, in this case, our Latinx communities. So thanks to all of you who participate and make life happen here in LA County and California. So with that, EJ, do we want to do a few photos?
It's up to the board. We're happy to do that. We obviously have our staff up here to be recognized and celebrated. So if you'd like to do a photo, we can do that up here or in the center.
I'd love to do that. I would like, if we could, if the board members will indulge, we'll take a photo for each, and those employees who feel comfortable in either or both photos, please join us, and we'll take just a few minutes and do that.
To do so, we are now on the heels of the 2023 California legislative session. I'm pleased to say that West Basin probably had one of its most proactive sessions under the leadership of Matt Bay, our manager of water policy and resources development. And for our monthly update, we're lucky enough to have both Emily Pappas and Jamie Miner of EML Pappas and Associates for the state legislative briefing. So I'm happy to introduce them. They are joining us virtually from Sacramento and will be presenting this item. And also you should have their slides and the presentation in front of you. We'll also add that to the comments section if it's not already done.
Okay, great. Thank you, EJ, and welcome Emily and Jamie, and take it away.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the nice introduction and nice to see all of you, even virtually. So we thought we would just do a little recap of how the year went and talk a little bit about some of the lingering issues and work to be done going into the next legislative cycle, if that's okay with you. I'll still on this intro slide, the legislature just adjourned was it last week or the week before, on September 14th. So most of them have gone back to their districts. Some of them are still up here doing press conferences in order to influence their bills getting signed, because the governor now has until October 15th to sign or veto those. I think he's only come out with one tranche of bill signatures and vetoes in press release so far. There was, you've probably read in the press, on two of the big climate bills, SB 253 and 261, he has indicated he will be signing those. Again, not a direct impact to us, but a direct impact just on his national, policies that get him that national traction. As far as the end of session goes, it was one of the weirdest ones I've ever experienced. And I know a lot of you all have experienced a lot of end of sessions where crazy shenanigans can happen, but this one was done shy of midnight, very quiet, and there were no controversial bills really done that last night of the session. They had already been worked out that week, the week of, on the controversial front. And I think some of it is because COVID got in the way, the last few years of people, knowing what shenanigans can be up to in the end of session. So with COVID making things a little bit more normalized, I think that stuck a little bit. Part of it also was, and I'll talk about this in another slide, we had a leadership change, at least in one house towards the end of this legislative session. So maybe things, were just done differently. And then finally, that 72-hour rule, which was implemented a few years back, really has changed things. That basically says if a bill's not in print for 3 days, it can't be voted on. So you have the last night of session minus 3 days. It really limits the ability of people to sneak, controversial things in there that usually had caused these very climatic last days of session. So going into the next slide, 2023 session by the numbers. So you'll recall that when we met, probably did this call, well, I know we've done it before a year ago, but a year ago at this time, we were saying that there had been a mass exodus of people deciding to be done early and take jobs in the third house, or they were terming out. So we started this year with 35 new legislators in front of us, and of which some of those were new delegation members for all of you. So that meant taking those first several months, getting to know these new legislators, getting to know who their staff were and where staff had changed their placements, and doing meet and greets. So we were sure to do that. And then on the first day, members were sworn into the session. The assembly, as you'll recall, decided to change their leader of the speaker. You'll recall the end of last year, they started that conversation, and then they brought the members back on their first day of session. And after 6 hours kind of closed door debate, we came out with a new speaker. We went from Speaker Anthony Rendon to Speaker Rivas. So that was also something that took up the time in the beginning of the year. And then as far as legislation introduced, the Assembly decided to introduce 1,751 bills. The Senate, as you can see here, introduced 881 with a total of 2,632 bills introduced. And that doesn't include the bills that were introduced in the special session around gas prices and infrastructure streamlining. And then we saw last week that about a little over 1,000 bills got to the governor's desk. So about a third of them made it to the governor's desk. And then we'll see how many he vetoes, and we'll do an assessment after October 14th. Another thing that we saw this year was this year's budget feels far less certain as major funding decisions still need to be worked out. With the governor's projected $32 billion deficit, our legislative analysts projected the number to be closer to 35 billion. And estimated state revenues will be about 11 billion lower than the governor's estimates. So still a lot to be worked out there, and that will definitely impact things like, bills that require ongoing funding or grant opportunities, which I know, we watch closely for you all. When Speaker Rivas took over in June, we had been hearing rumblings that we wouldn't see huge changes as far as committee chairs. And I think a lot of that has still held. I think that those will be coming probably this year. But what we did see change in his leadership positions. And those offices or positions are usually held by those that he had a close relationship with before or helped him become leader. So you'll see that the new Speaker Pro Tem is Cecilia Aguilar-Curry from Northern California. And then others that he is close with are Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, Jim Wood, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, and Jesse Gabriel, who comes from Southern California. And then on the Senate side, the Pro Tem, it hasn't officially changed, but there was a vote to replace Senator Pro Tem Atkins with Senator Mike McGuire. We presume that will be sometime in January, but again, no, we don't know those details, and have enjoyed working relationships with both those offices. And with, of course, with that change, there'll be change of staffing, which we'll closely monitor for you and see how that is of impact on issues we work on your behalf. So the next slide here, and I think EJ briefly mentioned it. This last March, we reinstated, West Basin in Sacramento, and I think it was a total success. A couple of you came, and as well as EJ and Matt, and we set up 17 meetings with either your legislative delegation or other legislative leadership and staff. We met with key committee chairs and also leadership offices, and met with 5 new delegation members. We look forward to doing this next year with the hope that a few of you want to, aren't sick of us and did the day of back-to-back meetings and want to do those again. That's something we are happy to set up and look forward to. So I'm going to switch it over to Jamie to go through some of the policies that we worked on this year on your behalf and the successes there.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. It was a pretty busy year as far as the total number of bills, as you heard, but just the sheer number of bills that we were tracking on your behalf. It was pretty aggressive. I think folks took no time to start introducing both new bill ideas, but also old bill ideas that have died in the past. And with new faces come a lot of those new ideas. So as far as just some of the hotter bills that we either were tracking closely or positioned on, I'll start with the conservation bills, by the first one being AB 1572 by Assemblywoman Friedman. You recall Laura Friedman was the author of the larger, Making Conservation a Way of Life framework that is now being heard at the regulatory level at the Water Board, and some of those timelines and rulemakings are being initiated. But she wanted to, move the ball further on this topic. So the first bill, which West Basin was able to come in support of, is AB 1572, which beginning in 2027 prohibits the use of potable water to irrigate non-functional turf on commercial, municipal, and institutional homeowners association, common interest, so medians, things like that. The water world, including West Basin, we're really able to embrace this through a number of amendments. One of the more controversial pieces of the bill at the very beginning of the process was the inclusion of multifamily housing, but that was taken out towards the end of session. So essentially all opposition was removed, which was nice to see. And then secondly, AB 1573 will phase out the new non-functional turf installation, as well as require non-native plants to the number of 10% of non-native plants, of California native plants instead of non-native, and making them drought tolerant, and again, instead of non-functional turf. So this bill was actually gutted in Senate appropriations, and it started out with a much higher percentage And then it was whittled down to 10%, and the timeline was phased out. So the author ultimately decided to shelve the bill, just thinking that it didn't quite move the needle enough. So we assume that bill will be back next year, just as she continues her quest to, to move the needle on conservation as a whole. A bill that we also supported, AB 735 by Assemblymember Berman. This was sponsored by CMUA, but had robust support from the entire utility community, both water, energy, across the board. We know that there are a lot of retirements that are forthcoming in the sector, so we need to get creative in how we address that. So this bill would have set up a high road utility career program to be administered by the California Workforce Development Board to connect existing resources with individuals interested in careers in the utilities sector. This bill, unfortunately, was held in Assembly Appropriations, probably because of that cost to the state. But again, because we know it's a complex issue that's not going away, and we need to find a solution for, we look forward to being at the table and coming up with, what solutions the legislature can move next so that they can move the needle on this issue. And then as far as long-term planning, the water industry came together this year with SB 366 by Senator Caballero. This was a bill that West Basin supported, which would have established a longer-term water supply target and tie it to the California Water Plan, with the idea that we need the infrastructure in place in order to meet certain water supply goals. So why not tie the two together? This bill was met with steep opposition from environmental NGOs. So ultimately, it was positioned to be rather watered down in the second house in the Assembly Policy Committee, and the author decided, instead of taking some of those amendments, to just put the bill on hold for the year and come back next year. So we'll see that next year. And I think our trade associations are trying to figure out what to do in the meantime to make sure it's a meaningful effort. So we look forward to being on the table or at the table on that. And then SB 23 by Senator Caballero as well, a real champion for us. She authored Aqua's sponsored bill, which would have expedited the timelines for necessary agency permitting of water projects. This bill was also held in Senate Appropriations, but it moved the needle as far as the conversations that happened within the governor's infrastructure package and streamlining how we get projects built more quickly. So I'll touch on that a little bit later because that was a big theme that we saw this year, but ultimately this bill wasn't necessary because it was figured out elsewhere. And then just a district bill, I know we are watching closely, AB 1216, which was targeted at the impacts of the Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant in El Segundo. This bill was sponsored by the city of El Segundo and requires fence line monitoring of the facility. So again, a very district-specific bill, was written to be district-specific, so it only applies to that plan. It did pass and now is on the governor's desk. So that's just a snapshot of some of the bills we were most active on. And then we'll get to a few others as well, but going on to the next slide.
And before you go forward, Jamie, just hold on for 1 sec so I can open it if the board has any questions or comments on this slide or anything to talk to. So are there any questions or comments on any of these items at this moment?
No, thank you.
Okay, I think I have one or two for you, Jamie, and one is the AB 1572, Friedman. Obviously, I know that's on the governor's desk, and my understanding is we don't know if he's going to sign it or veto it. That's what the last I understood. Do you all know if that's accurate, or what have you heard more recently?
Yeah, I think we would be pretty surprised if he did veto it. Again, the initial framework from a number of years ago, sponsored by Assemblywoman Friedman, really teed up, the legislature to work with the water board and have them come back and, look at certain goals and metrics. So I think that this is in, that keeps that process in mind. I don't think we heard any, major concerns from them, throughout the process as a number of the stakeholder requests were figured out. So I would be very surprised if it was vetoed. It just is in line with everything that's within the water supply strategy too, on conservation being a key part of, how we meet those goals that are outlined in the water supply strategy.
Okay, very good. And then on this, the second one, AB 1573, so that one, the author basically shelved it or pulled it back this cycle.
That's right. I think because there were there were such significant amendments, put on the bill, with it not within her control. I think she decided it wasn't really the direction she wanted to go. It didn't move the needle far enough, so decided to put it on hold and just come back next year and figure out, a better way to kind of thread the needle on getting at, a California native plant goal and replacing the installation of, future turf, not just replacing what we have, but also the installation of new turf.
Okay, very good. And with that one, it says require 10% drought tolerant California native plants by 2029. That was what it originally was, or that was what it was becoming toward the end of its.
Good question.
tenure?
Yeah, that's what it does as we're in now.
Okay.
So it started out, I believe, over 50%, requiring over 50% drought tolerant and California native plants. And actually, it was just California native. The definition of California native did not include, non-native drought tolerant. And so that was another big change too that I think, probably was a disappointment to the Assemblywoman.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. And so obviously, this is one of the ones we'll be watching in the new year as it, continues. And we need to understand how that works, especially when you look at the whole state rather than just parts of the state. Because, the geography is different in different areas. So, okay.
Yeah, and that one actually, it did see some opposition from like the nursery industry who didn't think they would be able to meet the 50% goal that was in the bill, just because they didn't feel there were enough, California native plants out there to really meet that demand should this bill be implemented. So that, I think that was another consideration that they're still going to have to work through. And, if the plants aren't there, they're not there. So it might be difficult to meet those goals.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Any other questions on this one? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to the next slide, Jamie. Thank you.
So speaking of confusing, these constitutional amendments that are headed your way to the ballot in November are also very confusing, just because they all kind of contradict each other by design. But we thought we would try and do our best to kind of break it down, the best we can. And they are impactful to what local governments can do. So, it is important that folks understand what the consequences could be. So, this is a tactic that we are continuing to see private industry use to take things to the ballot that maybe they can't get done in the legislature. And so this was no exception, specific to tax policies and voter thresholds. So in the final few weeks of session, we saw two constitutional amendments really begin to heat up. And again, most because of this ballot initiative that qualified, that's sponsored by the California Business Roundtable, which essentially would, if approved, voters on the November 2024 ballot would require all new taxes passed by the legislature to be approved by a majority of voters, and for new local special taxes, the bar would rise from a majority vote to a 2/3 vote voter approval. So that's what the Business Roundtable initiative does. Again, already qualified, already a done deal on the November ballot. So in response, a number of local government groups as well as labor unions like SEIU came together and sponsored ACA 13 by Assemblymember Ward, which would require any state constitutional amendment proposed via an initiative that seeks to increase the vote requirement for future measures also be approved by that same proportion of votes. So in this case, a 2/3 vote. So really, it was a last-minute introduction in response to the California Business Roundtable proposed Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. And there again is a large coalition of supporters, and it did pass, somewhat on party lines, but it did need a 2/3 vote, so it was able to get above that threshold. And you saw even some more moderate members support it because, again, it's going before voters, so they are the ones that are ultimately deciding what that threshold will need to be. And then ACA 1 proposes lowering the vote threshold from 2/3 to 55% to pass infrastructure-related local bonds and special taxes. So it also needed 54 votes. As you can see here, this was one of the final votes, allowing it to clear the assembly. While this bill mostly had housing in mind, and that's who was really pushing it, other, infrastructure projects, including water, stormwater capture, will, qualify for the same protection that, if passed, this proposition would provide, or this constitutional amendment would provide. So to sum that all up in just a few short words, there'll be 3 initiatives on the November 2024 ballot. One would make it easier to raise new taxes, so that's ACA 1 by changing that threshold. 2, it would make it harder to raise new taxes, so that's the business sponsored initiative. And 3, it would make it harder to raise new taxes, and that's ACA 13. So that's kind of how we dumbed it down. And we wrote up a little report too that we can share with you. But that's, it took up a lot of the air in the room the final few weeks of session, because they were, it was a pretty controversial and contentious and important conversation and debate. Any questions on that, knowing how confusing it is?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, you helped me a lot too. It's extremely confusing. And I think, the voters are going to be extremely confused. So whoever's doing all this campaign work and messaging is going to have a lot on their plate. But now, wait a minute, the ACA 13 by Ward, that's coming up in March, right? March 2020. It says here March 2024.
Oh, sorry, that is November 2024.
Oh, oops. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I think that was one
November.
of the topics. Yeah, so they are all coming in November 2024. Thanks for catching that.
Gotcha. Okay. And then regarding that ACA 13, but it just has to be at the time supported by a majority of the voters in California, right? To pass.
That's right.
All of these are majority of the voters in California, right?
Yeah, it just depends on how they get there, right? 2 through the legislative path and 2 through the paying to get on the ballot path, but all 3 have to go in front of voters.
Perfect. Okay. One last question from me, because ACA 1, and I'm just going to ask EJ, we sponsored something very similar years ago. If you can remind us of what that was, with, I think Assembly Member Bloom was carrying it, but can you remind us, EJ, what were we?
That is correct. West Basin sponsored ACA 5 back in, I'm going to say 2016, and it lowered the vote threshold for special districts to pursue a GeoBond indebtedness for water supply infrastructure, similar to what school districts are available to as far as the vote threshold, and this follows a very similar model.
Got it. Great. All right. Well, look at all these conversations are now coming to a head in the whole state next year. So,
guys, trailblazers.
Yeah, really. You all were there with us, I believe. I think you were helping us out. But let me open this up to any other colleagues. Any questions or comments at this time on these upcoming initiatives?
No, thank you.
No. Director Gray, yes.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I have no questions. I mean, I think you asked a number of questions that were part of what I wanted to hear, but I wanted to thank the ladies for the presentation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's nice.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Gray. So with that, if you can move forward.
Yeah.
Jamie and Emily, go ahead.
And then this one will be quick. Because again, this happened earlier in the year, was the governor's, he's already signed it into law as well, suite of bills that were intended to facilitate the permitting and approval process for water and other infrastructure projects in California. So just for quick background, in May, the governor announced a number of legislative proposals to streamline the approval and permitting process by this executive order. And then it also created an infrastructure strike team to work across state agencies to maximize the amount of funding they can get, both federal and state, for different infrastructure projects. This was a huge point of contention within the legislature. They, really felt they were being jammed instead of, these policies going through the typical legislative vetting process, committee hearings, et cetera. So, they had significant concerns. and mostly, I think their concerns were based on just, again, the process alone. These are these are CEQA reform. They're very complex, controversial measures that did not include any legislative feedback or input. And, they had quite a bit of opposition, mostly from environmental groups who, they echoed the concerns that many legislators raised on the process alone, and kind of some of this being done behind closed doors. So ultimately, after a few weeks of extremely tense negotiations in the midst of this, ongoing speaker transition, as Emily mentioned, there was a deal struck. And these were, some of the big bills that ultimately, make changes to our existing regulatory permitting process. But as we move forward with different projects, hopefully we will be able to take advantage of some of these reforms. One thing to note is that Delta conveyance and desal projects were specifically excluded from all the expediting bills. That was, not that the governor wanted them to be included. He was very vocal of them wanting to be included, but the legislature just pushed back on those two things. Pretty much, we're willing to hold up the entire deal from happening if those were included. So they were taken out, and other water and energy projects can benefit, but conveyance and desal cannot. So again, won't go into all of the nitty gritty because CEQA is also confusing, but that gives you just the landscape of what happened earlier this summer. And if you want to go to the next slide, the other conversation that really took up a lot in the air in the room. West Basin did not actually take positions on these bills, but there were 4 bills introduced that really were looking to overhaul how the water rights system is enforced and regulated in California. That was after some bad press last year during in the midst of the drought, where you had a few cattle ranchers that were withdrawing water, despite being told by the water board to curtail. And it just kind of shed light on, well, maybe there are some reforms needed within our water rights system. So these 4 bills were introduced. Ultimately, 3 of the major ones were put on hold by aggressive lobbying from our trade associations, that really monopolized a lot of the meetings that, Aqua had, that your staff sat through. And all these special meetings that were called to figure out, how they were going to work and what amendments they were going to provide. But we will see this conversation bubble back up next year. So just wanted to flag that. One bill by Senator Allen did make it to the governor's desk. However, a lot of the concerns within the bill, as far as due process and allowing water rights holders to, have some sort of say on, how certain water claims are investigated, et cetera, that did make it to the governor's desk, and they were able to strike a compromise, and so opposition was removed. But just planting a flag that conversation is not going away. We'll be back next year, and again, took up a lot of the air in the room. So thought it was worth noting. I think Emily's going to bring us home with just what we can expect for next year and what we're going to be on the lookout for this fall.
Yeah, so just in conclusion and on the lookout for our representation of you next year, next slide, that matters. Committee shakeups, as I mentioned on our earlier slides, we did not see much committee change from when the new speaker took over. So we can definitely imagine that he will be looking to the Budget Committee, Appropriations Committee, Judiciary Committee, Transportation Chairs, all of them, to see where it makes sense to put possibly, those that rallied around him to be speaker into those committees of importance. We've heard rumblings here and there, and we'll continue to, keep a close eye on those changes, but we expect to see those in the beginning of the year. Next on here is just budget uncertainty. Again, I know I touched upon that a little bit. We're still waiting on these revenue totals, but as the governor has really, governor's punted on some of these conversations given the October change for when taxes are due. So waiting to see what those numbers show. And then bonds. So speaking of cuts, there was a lot of work the last few years on trying to get a water bond resurrected. This year, the conversation really changed from a water bond and climate bond to basically one bond called Climate Resilience Bond. So we will continue to have those conversations that were punted from this year to at least next. West Basin, we've been working with our associations on vocalizing support within that bond on priorities, including water recycling and ensuring maintenance of water recycling projects is included. So that will continue to be what we champion for with your associations. And if that changes, you obviously can let us know. And then in 24, we will be faced with more turnover with 20 turned out members. So next year we'll continue with the relationship building with the 35 members we mentioned from this year, plus, deciphering who's going to be running for these 2024 open seats, these 20 open seats, and starting the relationship building with them as they run. We will always be on the lookout for grant funding, which we know that's important. We have a good pulse on that. And then finally scheduling, with you through your wonderful staff on the 2024 Advocacy Day. So that's it on our end. Like I said at the top of it, we appreciate working through all of you, and both EJ and Matt, I feel like sometimes we talk to on a daily basis for sure, if not at a minimum weekly basis, and they are constantly keeping us apprised of your priorities and the nuances of what's going on so that we can, do the best work we can advocating for you here in Sacramento.
All right, well, thank you both very much. Definitely appreciated, and happy to hear at our board meeting, because I know you normally do as a committee meeting, but I think it's really good at the board meeting to do this today. So with that, I'm just going to open up again to my colleagues if you have any questions or comments, Emily or Jamie at this time. Anybody here, or Director Gray?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
No, thank you.
No,
thank
oh,
you.
there you are. So Director
No,
Gray, you
thank
said you have nothing? Okay. I don't think I really have any questions for you ladies. I try to stick abreast of all these things, but just remind me, so the climate resilience bond, they're looking at potentially next November, right? Is that maybe the target at this moment?
That's right.
There's a few bonds that I think, they're just trying to figure out the amounts and dividing it amongst, I think there's a housing bond. We already have passed a mental health bond. So the state can only go into so much debt. I think they're estimating around 28 billion. So right now, it's at 15 billion. So I think that's just the number they really have to figure out. If that needs to be lower to allow for more, debt for other issues.
Gotcha. Okay. So with all that being said, and we had some turnover last year, plus we had redistricting. We got to meet a lot of our new members. And we really want to say thank you to that, as well as what might happen in the new year with committee leadership changes or tweaks. And then with these ballot negotiations coming down the pike, I just, at the end of the day, there's a lot at stake, quite frankly, I believe in the next legislative session, the next year of the session. So we're definitely going to count on you, but also I think it's imperative that West Basin stays extremely engaged and also working with Aqua and other groups to figure out where we're at here. Because again, like you just said, a number of things got pushed back or punted, and we don't know what the economy is going to do potentially, as well as some other things here. So anyway, with that, I think next year is going to be very consequential personally. And I think that working with EJ and Matt, we really need your good assistance and representation up there. And we need to make sure we're looking at these bills and see where we need to support, where we need to stay neutral. And maybe sometimes we just oppose, but definitely thank you for your work, ladies. We really appreciate you and your team.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
All right, very good. So thank you for being here. And with that, I will go ahead and move on to the next item. So we are going back to item 6, which is items too late to be agendized. I don't believe we have any.
That is correct.
Great. Item 7 is our consent calendar. So unless somebody has any polls, I would entertain a motion to adopt all these.
I would like to
Sure.
pull item 7E.
You want to pull 7E?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to pull 7E. Okay, so if everyone's okay, I would entertain a motion for 7A, B, C, D.
Second.
You're making the motion or you're?
I'll make the motion.
Director Deere makes the motion.
I'll second it.
Director Williams second. All right, so we, any questions or discussion on that? We're going to vote on 7A, B, C, and D, as in dog. DJ, if you'll do our roll call vote.
Happy to do so. Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes,
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Director Desi Alvarez,
Yes, but I would like to record a no on 7B and 7C.
and President Scott Houston.
Yes, and you know, I just realized it goes to the next page, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So there's items F, G, and H that are part of that. So my apologies, I didn't add that in there. So Director Deere, are you okay to add those?
Yes, I can. Sometime.
And you concur, Director Williams?
No problem.
Okay, so do we need to take the vote again? Mr. Legal Counsel?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Do we need to take the vote again since I left off the other items that were part of that or not?
I think it's okay as long as it's clear to everybody here. Yeah.
Okay, and so what was the vote count, EJ?
We had a 5-0 vote with an exception to, there's one no vote, I believe it was a no vote, on 7B and 7C.
Yes. I think that's correct. Yes, so I apologize for that. So that was again 7A, B, C, D, F, G, and H. Great. Now we're going to go back to item 7E, which was a poll from Director Alvarez.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. The item before you is item 7E. It's a resolution number 0923-1197, authorizing an application for grant funding to the United States Bureau of Reclamation for the fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 Water Smart Planning and Project Design Grant Program. And for this presentation, we do have our Manager of Water Policy and Resources Development, Mr. Matt Bay.
Mr. President, the rest of the board would like a presentation. I just have some questions, and I think Matt might be able to address my question. What is the proposed project that we are going to apply the grant funding for?
So it would include a package of some of the technical planning studies that were past year.
Can you speak up, Matt, number one?
Yeah.
What page are we on?
You're on page 56.
56. You'll speak louder. Thanks.
So there was, I think we're still finalizing which specific projects it is, but it would be, I believe, 3 or 4 different technical planning studies that were, of the 7 that were passed in the budget.
Okay,
last
so-
year.
So we don't, you can't list for me what those projects are, right?
I think we could. I believe one of them, I don't know if Wendell, if you have the most recent, but it would be, I believe, the pipeline connection to metropolitan system. I believe it would be the hydraulic analysis.
What pipeline connect,
Sure, Walker.
help me out, because
Oh, here's water.
what I read the staff report, and reading the staff report is very generic. And so we're kind of signing a blank check, if you will, and that's my reservation. So I'd like to know, if we're applying for grant funding, what specifically are we applying grant funding for? And if, it doesn't sound like you have that answer right now. I mean, I'm really looking, what is it? And then my follow-up questions to that were, how much will West Basin be required to spend? In other words, do we know how much we're asking for? And then what are we required to spend? That wasn't in the staff report either. And then what funding source will we be taking the money for our matching funds? Those are my 3 questions. They kind of follow from each other.
Okay.
I
I know.
don't know if you have the answers, but that's why I pulled it.
Speak to some of them. I know in terms of the cost share, It depends if it's in a disadvantaged community. So there is a potential waiver of some of that, but it's up to a maximum of 50% cost share. It's as low as 0 if it was like a fully contained within a disadvantaged community, which I don't think this would follow that, but it would be up to 50% would be the cost share. And then again, in terms of the actual projects, I believe the ones that we were looking at most recently were the connection to the pure water, the pipeline that would connect to metropolitan system. So that would be one. There was a hydraulic analysis. That was the second one. And then I can't remember if the third was the IRP or if there was another one.
If I may,
Go ahead.
As part of the technical planning budget, we had 9 studies. 7 of them involved a look at West Basin's recycled water system as it relates to pure water potentially becoming available. Out of those 7 studies, 3 are the ones that are now being considered for this application. At some point, we were thinking of 7, and then looking at some of the details, it's boiling down to 3. The 3 are, like Matt said, the interconnecting pipeline from pure water to West Basin's southern leg of the system. Another assessment was a look at the potable water backup opportunities for that system. And the third one is the condition assessment of the southern leg of the system to see what improvement, rehab, and cleaning opportunities that we would need to require for connecting to the pure water system. They're also not identified here because we're having almost weekly meetings trying to discuss, looking at the particulars of each of the assessment, making sure that we have the best application to put in, considering all the requirements and the criteria for each of the grants.
And Director Alvarez, if I could just add, it was our understanding that in the adoption of the budget during that process, the board had requested that staff find alternative sources for funding. Part of that was a discussion with our project partners as far as them potentially funding portions of these studies. But we were also intending to seek out grants whenever possible. And so that is part of this effort.
I appreciate that. It's just my hesitancy and my questions go to the fact that I think we need a little bit more time to define what these are. And then, so as we approve the authorization to apply for the grants, we're actually making a commitment in the event that we get the grants. And even when we apply for the grants, we're making a commitment to bind this board to come up with additional funds. And yet we don't know exactly what those grants are going to fund. In other words, we don't know what we're applying for. At least the board doesn't know at this point. And it's not a good business decision to kind of issue blank checks out there. So that's my reservation. And I know that one of the items that Barshef just mentioned was pure water, but pure water right now is not an approved project by Metropolitan. It's still a conceptual project. We don't know what version of pure water is going to come out if pure water ever gets approved.
And to that, I would just add that this is not obviously a project to make that connection, but the study that we would need to do to incorporate that water within our system. From staff's perspective, the budget process, as we move through there and we identified the projects and programs that were included in the budget, including the technical planning studies, this is part of that effort. We could forego this funding opportunity, and this receiving the grant award would not necessitate us to spend the money. We could always reject the grant once it's been awarded, but this would be our normal process if we want to seek funding.
Can we apply for this funding at a later date, in a month from now, when the staff can come back with a definition of the projects?
So there is a second, this specific grant has a secondary application deadline in April of 2024. So we could postpone it to that time if we wanted to. We had been looking at it as we can apply in both phases potentially if we had so we wanted to try to get an application in at this time and then go for a second one in April as well, but we can do that. Yes, there's a secondary deadline.
I'm more comfortable with having a better definition of what we're applying for. And I think if you can do that, then we can still apply for the grant. We're in a better position as a board to know what we're applying for. So I would appreciate that. I would move that we defer this to such time as the staff can come back with more specific description of what the grant application's for, and then at that time approve the grant. I'm all for getting the grant. I'm just concerned about what specifically. I think we're still grappling with what are the projects that we're really trying to define. And it's very hard because some of the things we're trying to do are being influenced by other parties, and at this point, they're moving parts.
Okay, well, hold on one sec. So we have a motion on the floor to defer, although I see Joe, you have your hand up.
I was just going to say to what the general manager said, we're not making a commitment at this time, a legal commitment for sure. So that's, and I see these a lot as kind of a formality of what's required in order to start the process. Doesn't mean the board wouldn't want more information before they start that process. Just want to be clear about the commitment and the comment about blank check. There's certainly a whole CEQA component and all that stuff that would need to come at a later time. I just want to make sure.
Well, but the application's being made without a sequel or anything else. So we're applying for grant funding, and yet we're authorizing an application for grant funding if you read the resolution. And yet it doesn't say what grant funding, what that grant funding is going to be for, beyond us just basically saying apply for grant funding for planning studies. And that's how the resolution reads, very open-ended. And that's the concern that I have, that I would like to see more specificity when we apply for something, instead of just making this commitment to something that we may come back and say, well, wait a second, we didn't agree to that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, so hold on one second. I mean, we have a motion on the floor. It's not been a second yet, although I don't know if we need a motion. We could just do nothing today, quite frankly, but a motion has been made. So is there a second to the motion?
If you want to do nothing, I'm fine with that too.
Well, if we're not gonna do anything, I'll second the motion.
So now we have a motion on the table and a second. We keep it discussing, and I'll just chime in as well. Like, I think Director Alvarez has said, this doesn't seem like we really know all the details yet. I did look at this, you know, it has a deadline, October 17th, but you say there's another deadline. So if we don't do anything by the 17th, we're okay. We're not gonna miss out on anything at this moment. Okay.
I just want to make, sorry, I want to make sure that that's clear. We would be skipping this funding round, and we would be deferring, we would need to apply in that second round.
That's fine, but we're, at the end of the day, we're not missing the boat.
I don't think it's fine at all. I think we should jump in there and get in there.
Well, here's what I'd like. Number
I'm not
one,
in favor of this motion.
let me run the meeting and I'll call on everybody. But what I'm also saying is in this, there, you know, it is what it is. Sadly, there's no identification of any projects. I mean, it just says they would come from our list of projects or something like that, but staff would decide. So I do think, you know, it'd behoove staff to give us a better idea of what we're actually applying for on this, because we don't have a clue how much the money is. There's not a lot of details in this. And I wasn't at that committee meeting, so I wasn't there to weigh in. But I think Director Alvarez is making a very valid point. And if we don't need to do anything, you know, in a rush by the 17th of October, I think that we're fine to hold off a little bit and have staff give us a better idea of options. But that's my opinion. So now, Director Gear, go ahead.
I'm not gonna vote for the motion that's on the floor now. I'll make a motion that we pass, when the time comes, that we pass the recommendation.
And Director Williams, anything?
I've said what I have to say.
Okay. I see you, Barquette, but I hear Director Gray. Director Gray, anything?
Yes, and I'm sorry I'm not there, but trying to understand what staff, and certainly Director Alvarez has valid points, but I think this was heard in committee. But if we do not approve the motion today, what's the disadvantage to us? And I'd like to hear from EJ for that.
I think the simple disadvantage is that we would just have one swing at this. A lot of times West Basin has applied for grants and not received the funding on its first effort. We refine the package and we submit it. In this case, and I do recognize, and I see that Wendell's joined the table as well to maybe answer a few more questions. The direction that I provided to staff was that as part of the budget process, the board adopted a budget that included several technical planning studies. Those were identified in the budget, and the board had directed staff to go out and find alternative sources or partners to help pay those down. And in that budget process, we just simply cut the budget for those technical planning studies in half. So what I've directed our staff to do at this time on almost all of our programs and projects is go seek out every dollar we can from our state and federal partners. In looking at the technical planning studies that are identified in the budget, staff has done that, but as Matt mentioned, sometimes you have to really look at the study that you're going to be doing to make sure that it meets all of the components of a potential grant. And then you want to make sure that you include those technical studies in there so that you score the best and can be competitive in that. Now, I recognize that the deadline is October 17th, it sounds like. And yes, probably through my pressure, staff is putting this together to get us a solid effort and an opportunity to get grant funding here. But I think that's maybe where there's an issue, and I recognize that. Wendell, I don't know if you have anything to add as far as the.
Yeah, there's a couple points to add here. Is that we, like EJ alluded to, is that we looked at all 7 of the projects that were part of the budget. And as we were looking at the criteria given by the grantee agency, we determined that 3 of the 7 were most suitable for the grant. Okay, and we haven't determined, we haven't completed the application. We haven't determined if we are going to move forward with all 3 of the projects. But I do have the particular projects that we're talking about. What this does allow with round 1, this is similar to Safe Routes to School. There are going to be several rounds of this grant. What it does allow us, by applying for the first round, the granting agency will offer a critique of the prior application in order to fine tune it so that it will be more successful in the April round that follows. The first round is chiefly about planning projects that are not ready for construction. And the second round will be your projects that are in the advanced planning stages and that are ready for construction. So if you don't apply on this particular round, will lose out on the opportunity to get a critique from the agency that's offering the grant on how to improve the grant for the second round of April. The projects that are listed is.
Go ahead, Director Gray.
Yeah, and thank you for that. So the board will have an opportunity to get the information that Director Alvarez has mentioned in the second round. I mean, I understand you can refine the application, and then would the board have an opportunity to know what that refinement is and to weigh into that decision?
I didn't quite hear her question about the projects.
Yeah, yes. If we do the first round, the second round, I understand it's like a refinement and more focus on what project. So would the board have an opportunity to weigh into that information, that input, or at least you will be able to answer Director Alvarez's question?
I think Wendell was about to give you the specific 3 projects that have specific, though rough, budgets included within our annual budget.
And the staff will report back to the board about the information provided as a critique of the first round of the grants if we decide to move forward with the second round.
I appreciate that.
Hold on.
That was the answer to my question. Thank you. That's why I think it is important to move forward because we will have an opportunity to refine it and be more focused. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Director Gray. Director Alvarez.
I
go ahead.
appreciate that, but that is not what we're doing. What we're doing is, if we were to approve the resolution, is we would be authorizing the general manager to make applications for grants under the current round. And whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 6, I don't know. It doesn't say. It's very open-ended. It's the general manager. If we really knew, and October 17th is not that far away, if we knew what we are applying for, then we should have been provided with that information in the report and/or when I asked the question. Here is specifically what the grant application will be for. And I haven't heard that, and actually heard the opposite. We're thinking about this, and we're thinking about that, etc. So it is not defined at all. We do not give up very much by going and making this application in the second round. These are planning grants. These are not construction grants. We are not saying that we need grant 1 to get grant number 2. And the only justification that was provided was, well, if we don't get the grant, then we can meet with the granting agency. We would have to request a meeting to find out what we did, or what should we have done in the grant application to make it a better, to make it a better opportunity for an award. So again, it's the open check idea that concerns me, and I would like to know what we're going to apply for. And I think in a month or two, you will be able to do that, and then we're not going to lose anything in applying for this at a later date. Anyways, those are my concerns. We have a motion. Let's just vote on it.
I have the working titles of the grants.
Very generic. I heard it. Okay.
Before I call for the roll vote here, I just personally think too, I mean, this is very generic on this, and I don't think an argument's been made that says we have to jump on this today. I plead a little ignorance. I don't recall when we've had some of these in the past. They've usually been fairly specific. They probably have more details, but this one really has no details. And I think that, to me, that's a bit of an issue. So seems like staff could really put together a package to bring back to the board for discussion, and then we could look at authorizing this. That's how I would look at it personally. So it just seems half-baked at this moment, what you're providing to us. So, yeah, I think that we've discussed it quite a bit. And hold on one second, Director Gray. I don't really think staff has made a valid point here to justify us authorizing this as is today. I think it needs to be more specific. And if you got some time to do it, you can do it. I also don't look at the calendar and see us having time to try and schedule a special meeting to look at this by October 17th. Unless we really need to. So regardless of that, I really, I think that the motion that's now on the floor is probably what should be voted on as a yes and prevail today. With that being said, Director Gray, did you have a question or comment?
May I please?
Of course yes.
Thank you. With all due respect, I heard Director Alvarez's perspective on what staff has said, but I did hear staff, and I do believe them, that it would put us at a disadvantage if we don't do the first round. So I'm not sure, like I said, I heard his perspective, but I do think that we should not miss this opportunity. And if it's the first round that gives us a better chance, we can refine it at the second round with being more focused. And so that's the reason why I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Director Williams.
I'm confused now.
Oh. What's your
And I-
confusion?
Maybe we should clarify the motion on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will. Is that what you're
Yes.
confusion on? Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and clarify the current motion on the floor.
I think the current motion was to defer the item to a later time. There's no definitive date. So you'd be taking no action and therefore you would not be submitting an application for the first round.
Okay,
So we just push this back.
okay.
Yeah.
That's what,
The chair, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was the motion to defer it. I'm sorry.
oh, that's
I would
okay.
not
We just want to make sure it's clear.
I will not support that one. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so very good. All right, I really think we've talked about it plenty. I really think staff needs to go back to this a little bit and bring us much better information as to what you're gonna put this in on, as well as we don't even know what the cost points are at all. This is just purely open. And even if that's the way the application is submitted, I mean, we don't know what we're gonna get, and then we're gonna be on the hook. So I really would like staff to give us a much better idea of what we're really gonna put into the request. And then that should probably be in our resolution when that time comes. So you got some time to do this. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead.
Can I say something?
Yes, Director, go ahead.
I'd like to say that we should not support this motion because I think we should get in and not give up on the first round, have our foot in the door. And then, of course, on the final round, we can be more specific as necessary. But I would not support this motion. This time, I support the staff's recommendation instead.
Very good. And I appreciate that. And I just, I feel like on our side, it's our responsibility to make sure we understand what the staff is applying to the government for and when we authorize it. So to understand your perspective, and I don't think it's going to hurt us if we don't get a critique from them. We've had a good working relationship. I think that our staff will work with the new date that they can do on this. So let's go ahead and call the question on this motion, which is basically to defer this. We did not put a date on it. EJ, if you'll call the roll.
Director Don Deere.
No.
Director Gloria Gray.
No.
Director Harold Williams.
Yes.
Director Desi Alvarez.
Yes.
Director President Scott Houston.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, staff. And please, EJ, you'll work on when that continues to come through committee.
Will do.
The information. Okay. Next item is action calendar 8A.
Yes, thank you very much, President Houston. The item before you is item 8A. It's a sponsorship of fiscal year 2023-2024 community outreach event. And for this presentation, we have Haza Vasquez, our Deputy Board Secretary 2.
Good afternoon, President Houston, members of the board. If I can turn your attention to packet page 91, where item 8A, sponsorship of fiscal year 2024 community outreach event begins. For you, I have one item today. This is a request from Director Houston for the board to consider sponsoring the upcoming Culver City 5th Annual Art Walk and Roll Festival that is scheduled to be held on Saturday, October 14th, 2023. Director Houston is requesting that the board consider a $2,000 sponsorship that would grant West Basin a district booth/table to distribute district information as well as an advertisement promoting district awareness. The district has not previously sponsored this event in the past, but more information regarding this specific request can be found on attachment A, which begins on packet page 93. Turning to to the bottom of page 91, going over the fiscal impact for this. But funds for the sponsorship of this community outreach event are included in the fiscal year 23-24 community outreach budget in the total amount of $75,000. Approving this sponsorship of the Culver City 5th Annual Art Walk and Roll Festival in the proposed amount of $2,000 would leave a remaining budget of $40,700. And now on packet page 92, I'd like to read the recommendation. Director Houston requests that the board consider approving sponsorship of the Culver City 5th Annual Art Walk and Roll Festival event scheduled to be held on Saturday, October 14, 2023 in the amount of $2,000. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Alvarez.
What are the sponsorship levels?
One second here. The way that it was explained to us by the organizer is they don't have set amounts per se. It was more of, they had a couple different activation opportunities and branding opportunities. It did start at $2,000, and depending on what it is that the agency was willing to offer, they would then be able to couple it with a few of the different activations there.
So for $2,000, did they say what does West Basin get for $2,000?
For the $2,000, the way that they explained it is that we would be a named logo sponsor with our logo included on various materials, banners, and things of the sort throughout the event. They are also offering us the booth or table to provide information there where they're expecting approximately 20,000 people to be in attendance. And they are also giving us the option to provide additional advertisement aside from just our logo placement throughout the event.
It's very open-ended again, but so basically our logo will be displayed on various materials that are associated with the event.
Correct.
But we don't know what those materials are.
I don't believe they provided us a list.
The attachments to the staff report has no information. So if you're looking there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because that's just the information that they provided. They didn't, other than letting us know that our logo would appear throughout and that there would be recognition for the district as a sponsor. They didn't give us specifics as to what materials it is that they will be providing, what type of banners or signs or things of that sort. Again, that our logo will be included on it.
I'm a supporter of the Culver City Art Walk. We go to the Culver City Art Walk. I just have a hard time ever seeing any logos at anything that you go into that event in the years past.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, and I see here it does say, which is kind of the usual with all these things. Advertising and brand recognition in arts and weekly publications to wherever they're advertising it, you're putting the logo on there, a rotating ad banner on their festival page, brand promotion, social media, advertising promotion, and targeted email campaigns, logo placement in all marketing collateral. So they're going to have that. And I think they said here is they're allowing us to have a booth as well as it looks like an advertisement. So, you know, apparently if we approve this, we can provide them some sort of ad as we do, and they're going to put that in whatever.
Like a newsletter.
Yeah, whatever they do for promotion. So pretty standard course in my opinion, but any other questions on this? Okay. And the only reason it came now is because like everything, some of these come in last minute. So I would entertain a motion to support this. Or I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion that we approve this.
I'll second it.
All right, there's a second. Any further discussion? Okay, with that, let's take a roll call vote.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Director Desi Alvarez, President Scott Houston.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Haza, for working on that. Okay, next, item 8B is in boy, the approval process for LAFCO Special District Alternate Member Election. EJ.
Yes, thank you very much. This item 8B begins on packet page 98. As you mentioned, it's the approval process for the LAFCO and Special District Alternate Member Election. This item was heard in our Finance and Administration Committee and was referred to the board without a recommendation. For this presentation, we have Desiree Quintero, our Manager of Administration.
Good afternoon, President Houston and members of the board. Since 1994, special districts in Los Angeles County have been represented by 2 members and 1 alternate of the Local Agency Formation Commission. Per West Basin Municipal Water District's Administrative Code, Section 2-1.303A7, with regard to the election of LAFCO directors and alternate directors, the president will act as instructed by a majority of the board. An election ballot is included as attachment A and has been received by the district. The ballot lists the following candidates for Special District LAFCO alternate member: Micah Ali, Stephen Appleton, Stephen H. Brown, Gary Burns, and Sharon Raga Vakari. With that, staff recommends that the board authorize the president to cast a vote for one candidate to be special district alternate member for the Los Angeles County LAFCO for the term expiring in May of 2026.
Very good. Thank you, Desiree.
Mr. President?
Yes, Director Deere, go ahead.
Yes, I speak as not only a member of this board, but also as the president of the LAFCO Commission. And I would like to see us support Mika Ali for a couple of reasons. One, he's geographically near our area, and the board seems to be overwhelmingly other parts of the county represented. So I think it's good that we have somebody more healthy to have representation from our general area. And secondly, although they're all apparently very well qualified people, I've known Mika Ali for many, many years, and I can vouch for his qualifications. So I would like to make a motion that we instruct the president to vote for Mika Ali.
I'll second that.
A motion on the floor and a second by Director Williams. He beat you to it, Director Gray. I see a hand up from Director Alvarez. Go ahead, Director Alvarez.
I just wanted to make a comment. I was not going to vote in support of any of these candidates, primarily because the only introduction that I had to any of the candidates was the material presented in the board package, and none of the candidates reached out individually and asked for a vote and provided an opportunity to enter into discussion as to their background and so on, and what they would bring. But I will support Director Deere's motion on the basis that Director Deere knows Mike Ali personally and is recommending him. But in general, if for things like this in the future, if somebody calls the district, that you might want to encourage them to reach out to directors directly. And I think in the past, when we've supported people for Aqua, et cetera, we've always been contacted individually by those asking for our votes.
Very good. Do you have a comment, just for EJ, because hold on one second, Director Gray. EJ, because I believe we talked about it at committee too, and I think staff did let these folks know, or however, if you want to come to the meeting or talk, as the one gentleman did, they could.
That's correct. Mr. Stephen Brown did send me a letter. I forwarded that onto the board of directors. Mr. Brown did exchange phone calls with me. I did let him know that this would be on the agenda. We did not notify all of the candidates, but Mr. Brown was the only one that reached out. It is important to note that Makai Ali has been very active in the West Basin service area for many years. He's a former consultant to West Basin because of his outreach abilities. And so he's very familiar with West Basin and what we do here.
Thank you. Director Gray.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank Mr. Brown for his presentation this morning. And I do agree that it's always nice for the applicants to reach out. But I just heard EJ said that we did not ask them to do that, which we're not required to do that. But I do know Makai Ali. He's been a consultant for the agencies. He's very much aware of the West Basin service area. And so that's why I will be supporting it, because our representative on LAPCO and the president, Director Deere, has made that recommendation. But I do want to thank Mr. Brown for his presentation this morning and coming before us.
Thank you very much. Let me just see here, just so I know it's for the alternate. And when do they, I know the deadline, but when do they actually accomplish the Director Deere?
Well, the next meeting is early October.
And how many votes are there? How many agencies?
Oh, 50 some special districts. The water districts are the most active, and they're the only ones who ever elected anyone because there's so many water districts. There are a few others like cemetery districts and
Mosquito abatement district.
Mosquito abatement districts, yes. Vector control, they call them now.
Very good. All right, well, with that, I know we have a motion on the floor. I also want to say thank you to Director Deere for his recommendation. I support it. And the other thing is, ultimately, I mean, in my personal opinion, if folks put themselves on these ballots, then of course, by all means, they should decide how they want to reach out to folks. We each got the materials, and yes, Mr. Brown did, I think, personally went the extra mile to reach out to us. So I think that's great. But I fully support what Director Deere said as well. And I think you probably have a pretty good list of candidates as it is. So with that, I'll go ahead and call for the question.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Director Desi Alvarez,
Yes,
President Scott Houston.
Yes. Finance passed unanimously. Okay. Item 8C is in caps, which is a recommendation to authorize payment invoice to reimburse Los Angeles Department of Water and Power for proportional costs incurred upon completion of construction of the South Gardena Recycled Water Pipeline Project, EJ.
Yes, thank you very much, President Houston. The item before you, item 8C, as you mentioned, is to authorize the payment of an invoice to reimburse LADWP for proportional cost incurred upon completion of construction for the South Gardena Recycled Water Pipeline Project. This item has been a part of my ongoing discussions with the City of Los Angeles. For this presentation, we do have Tammy Hurley-High, our Water Policy and Resources Analyst 1. She will present the item, and then I might follow that up with just a few comments.
Good afternoon, President Houston and members of the board. So this item is being brought to you today to request your consideration to approve the payment to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And this will be for their share of expenses that were related to the South Gardena Recycled Water Construction Project. So as a bit of background, West Basin was awarded grant funding in 2014 from the California Department of Water Resources under Proposition 84, Round 2. Integrated Regional Water Management Program. And this was to design and construct a recycled water pipeline in South Gardena. The new recycled water pipelines extended West Basin system to the West Basin District Service Area boundary and then into LADWP service area. So through this grant agreement, West Basin was the primary implementing agency. And this project was implemented with LADWP as a funding partner, and it had the support of the partnership with the City of Gardena. Both West Basin and LADWP perform their own construction for portions of the project within their own service areas. So the City of Gardena contributed effort with design aspects to meet the city's needs, along with their construction outreach. This project included 1.25 miles of recycling pipeline, and that served approximately 120 acre feet a year for irrigation in West Basin service area. So as part of the grant agreement, West Basin is to make payment to LADWP for the proportionate share of the grant funds. So included in this memo under attachment A is a copy of that invoice from LADWP. And it also includes the expense backup documentation. So now that the project construction has successfully completed, it has been successfully completed. Grant funding has already been received. Staff is recommending that the board authorize a payment to LADWP in the amount of $194,025 for their proportional share of this project. So regarding the fiscal impact, the funding in the amount of $975,000 has been received by West Basin, which is available in the district designated funds, the reserves, in order to reimburse LADWP for their share of the cost. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I can be happy to read the recommendation for discussion. So the recommendation is that staff recommends that the board authorize payment to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power for its proportional share of grant funding in the amount of $194,025 for costs incurred to complete construction of the South Gardena Recycled Water Pipeline Project.
I'll move approval.
Very good. We have a
I'll second it.
we have a motion on the floor and a second to move approval. Any questions? Any questions, Director Gray?
No, thank you.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Tammy, for that. So with that, we'll go ahead and call for a vote, EJ.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Director Desi Alvarez,
Yes.
President Scott Houston.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Passes 5-0. So we've already taken care of 9A, so we're going to move on to 10, receive and file. Does anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move, receive and file calendar.
Second.
Motion and a second, receive and file. Any discussion? With that, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray,
Yes.
Director Harold Williams,
Yes.
Director Desi Alvarez,
Yes.
President Scott Houston.
Yes. Excellent, thank you. Item 11, General Manager's Activities Report, EJ.
Mr. President, I have distributed copies to each of the board members. We will have one emailed out to Director Gloria Gray as well. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, very good. And we do have the copies up here. Do you email these also?
I will.
All right, does anyone have questions for our general manager?
I'll just say thank you, EJ, for providing a very succinct, general and thorough report.
Good. And Director Gray, do you have any questions for the general manager?
No, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, next is item 12, which is our general counsel's report. Chuck.
I have nothing for open session report.
Good, thank you. Item 13 is AB 1234, reporting compliance. Does anyone have anything to report? Anybody? Nothing to report. Okay, and I'll just go ahead, because I was absent at last month's meeting, so I'll just put there the items that were from the last 2 months for me, which are just 4. So August 18th, I had a meeting with the general manager. August 24th, I attended the Manhattan Beach Chamber of Commerce, where the mayor's city address. Director Alvarez was also there. August 31st, I spoke at the Culver City Arts Foundation Community Music event. We also had a booth there, and we had sponsored a series of music events over the summer, and that was the final one. So I would like to say a few words on behalf of the district, and let's see. Daryl was there that evening. Daryl Ramos-Young was there in that booth. And lastly, on the 15th of September, I had a meeting with our general manager. So those might be 4. Is that right? With that, we are moving into closed session. So item 14, Joe, if you could let us know.
I'll make the public announcement. The board will go into closed session to discuss one item, conference legal counsel, dispute litigation, 4 cases.
All right, very good. So with that, we're going to close session.
Hello.
Hey, Gloria. We are
Welcome back.
working our way back out here. Welcome back.
Assuming welcome back. I think
Hello. Hello.
Dr. Gray,
Yes,
you hear us? Oh, there you are. Okay,
Yes.
just hold on one
I can hear.
second. Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, we are back from closed session, and if our attorney could please report out.
I will make a public report that the board did not take any action in closed session.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Okay. So past closed session, the next item is 15, director's comments or future agenda items. Any board members' comments or future agenda items? See none.
No, thank you.
None. Director Gray, any comments?
Comments, just thank you to staff and everyone for presentations today. And no board items, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And what I would say is a couple of things. I do want to thank staff for putting together those proclamations and a lot of the other things you all are doing behind the scenes for each of the directors. We have our requests. Just reminding everybody, we've got the rain barrel events that are going on. I know we've already had one.
Yes.
We had
did.
one. And we've got actually technically 5 more coming up. So just remind everybody or tell all your people if they missed out on one, we still got opportunities from the sign up. And I know staff sends those numbers out to us every Thursday right now. So that's that. Number 2, the Water Harvest Festival is October 14th, correct, which is coming out very fast. And staff will continue to keep us updated through email, etc., as we get closer. So it's a great reminder to you all and our public about that event, which I think a lot of people are excited about. I am. So with that, I have nothing else.
President Houston, if I could add one thing, just to get it on the radar. I'll be having Desiree, if she hasn't already done so, reaching out to the board of directors. You'll recall that the month of December is an extremely busy month in terms of industry events and, of course, the holidays. And looking at the schedule, the 4th Monday of that month is actually on Christmas. Typically, we move that to the week before, but I know that our schedules can be very tight. So we'll need to adjust that meeting accordingly. But I think that we'll be able to find a suitable date for that.
Okay, let me, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're correct. It's the 25th, which is Christmas. Because how does it normally work in our?
December, according to the admin code, it's 3rd Monday, so the board meeting will be held on December 18th. Yes.
So we could continue talking about that, right? And the board can make a decision.
Correct.
Okay, so good to know. So maybe as we get closer to next month, especially EJ and I, we'll talk about it to see kind of where everyone's at, because, yeah, we're gonna have to be really pushing a lot of things through, and you have, CRUA conference. It's always in December as well, so, okay, very good. Thank you for that reminder. All right, I think, I was gonna say, so our next scheduled meeting right now, the regular scheduled meeting is October 23rd, 2023. And so with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.